All right, guys. Good morning. We've been given the thumbs up. So my name is Aubrey Tucker, and I'm with Etro Construction Limited, and this is Matt Hardwick.
Good morning.
Also with Construction Limited. We're going to present on our company's digital DNA. First, we're going to get into some brief introductions of who we are. So my background is in architecture. I have a architecture degree and practice in the design side for about 14 years. And just recently in the last year, I came over to the construction side. So my career really started in parametric modeling and building information. And so in that kind of pursuit, I was always really interested in one source of truth representing itself in several different mediums. So the most obvious is construction documents that are also renderings. But as you've probably seen a lot today, there are also different types of immersive designs. And so in my kind of hobby life, I also do installations for festivals. And so in that, it's one source of truth of a digital model that we use for virtual reality, virtual experiences that we then push into digital fabrication to have the dream become reality and then become a much bigger installation. So what I really enjoy in this kind of pursuit of work, it's one data set that is speaking to machines, speaking to renderings, speaking to artists, and then speaking to people about kind of what they want out of that experience. And so what I'm doing with Etro Construction as their Director of Innovation and Technology is looking at our entire business, kind of end-to-end, how work comes through the door and how work leaves, and how we can have that same kind of mentality through all of our different processes.
So I work as the Junior Business Analyst for Etro. My background is in sales and business development, but since joining the company, I've sort of gotten into the world of data and analytics, and basically helping Aubrey and the rest of the innovation and tech team sort of document our process into being more data-driven. So some of the stuff that I'm interested in is I love maps and data visualizations. So this one here is actually a heat map for the property values in Vancouver. I'm also really interested in how people interact with the built environment. I like to try and stay up to date with what planners are thinking and sort of what they have in mind for the future of our cities. As well as sustainable business practices, mass timber, modular, prefab. I try to stay up to date with these processes. I'm really interested in sort of the when this stuff will kind of reach the tipping point in Vancouver. And cities as well, sustainable development, community planning. It's a very complex problem, and there's a lot of stakeholders involved, and they each have different needs. So similar to technology, it's all about how we're trying to find solutions that work for everyone.
So who is Etro Construction? We're a general contractor and construction manager, and we operate in 4 main venues. Etro Living is residential, kind of hospitality work. Experiences are interior spaces, so we're doing a lot of restaurants, a lot of high-end bars, and just a lot of kind of spaces that we get excited about. And then Etro Ground Up is typical commercial work where we come from the ground to the sky. And then Revive is something that we've just developed in the last year. And this is something where we come in and do asset repositioning with clients who have underperforming properties. And so we come in and do a business analysis in terms of how we think we could get better revenue out of that property and then help them bring that project to life. So in that sense, we're kind of creating our own clients. And so there's a lot of technology that goes into the Revive that you'll see in this presentation that we're quite excited about. So just a little bit of our completed projects. We started just under 5 years ago. So Mike started this company in his basement. And we've done a lot of residential projects. We've done a lot of restaurants. We did most of the Muji stores in the east part of town. And we've done a lot of kind of like interesting spaces where people really wanted to do something that Etro came in and was innovative to make their dreams kind of possible on those projects, oftentimes with very small budgets. But now we've established ourselves and we're doing some really interesting projects. So Kwanju, just across from City Hall, is going to be a $10 million restaurant with about an $800 per plate price point. So really interesting and incredible technology in that space. We're going to projection map onto the plates. A lot of really complex things coming together in the construction. And now we're moving into some larger projects as well. So First West Credit Union is out in Langley. And we've done some kind of recent big wins. So the Berkeley Tower and at English Bay. And doing the 411 Railway, which is Neil's kind of crown jewel for himself, the owner of Inform. So we've got some interesting work, and the biggest thing that we're excited about is actually pushing technology into the contractor space. So a lot of our tech, kind of the backbone of it, is document management. That's often the issue for construction. So Procore is our partner in that. Procore is also a nice platform because it's open for integration. So you'll see a lot of construction companies talking about their tool set and how they integrate. These are all just other kind of facets of the tech stack and how it all comes together. BIM and VDC, I'm sure everyone is hearing tons of content on that today. At our scale, we're not working on projects that typically start with a BIM model. So more often than not, Etro is actually consuming that cost and creating the BIM for our projects, which is a very different mindset for how you do building information modeling in VDC, because you are now twice removed from the design intent, and you're still trying to represent that accurately. So that's a whole nother revenue kind of spot that we're looking at for smaller scale projects, things that are south of $50 million. Typically where you're not doing a lot of 3D modeling. AR and VR, this is really for us around complex coordination of reality versus fabrication. More often than not, we get design intent from mechanical engineers, which is more or less a line diagram. And then we work with a fabricator who would be the subtrade, who is going to fabricate ductwork. And so in their fabrication process, there's usually a 3D model. But if we don't have the architectural or structural models created, what we're left with is reality capture. So we're actually using Matterport for a lot of that. We'll get into that more later. Our biggest thing is that we're not afraid to do in-house development. And so in-house R&D is looking at where is the value for us in creating technology. More often than not, that's going to be in leveraging integration. So we're not doing redundant data entry or data modeling in multiple platforms. So Revisto is one of our partners for coordination, and I'll just quickly give them a shout out because I think this is a great tool for contractors where you're not quite at the stage where you need to do an RFI. You're actually just doing design review, and you want to bring up design questions. So if you have a pre-construction team, this is a great product for leveraging a bunch of models agnostically, marrying that up to two-dimensional drawings where you can have contextual review, drawing against 3D, and then create an issue and have a chat in terms of how you're talking about a particular issue. So the biggest thing in construction is phase modeling or time-based problems. So something is going to come in a sequence, and something else needs to work at that same time or near that same time. How do you visualize that? That's really the bread and butter for us in Revistos, creating those phases, creating those time dynamic problems, and then representing coordination within that platform. So our story with Matterport, this has been kind of an introduction to projects at this scale. For those who are not aware, Matterport was developed for the real estate industry, and so it's typically just used to do a virtual tour. So it's kind of like a Google Earth or like Google Street View type thing. But what's quite interesting about it is that it yields two models. It will give you a point cloud, and it will give you a OBJ mesh model. And so what's neat about those is that you're getting this at an incredibly low cost. So the Matterport itself is a cheap camera. It requires no expertise to run. You don't have to do any kind of like point registry across your scans. And so what you're able to do is now bring up this idea of scans across time. So where were we at week 10? Where were we at week 60? And we can start to do those comparisons. So obviously, any kind of work before pre-boarding is a really good time to do your scan because now you can go back, measure where studs are, measure where services were that are now covered up. So one of our projects, House of Funk, we were playing with this other integration that the Matterport cloud system has. It's called Matter Tags, and so you just kind of see those little dots there. So you're able to host this model on a website, and through the Matter Tags, you can start having a webhook kind of connection. So one of the things we were playing with was working with Uber Eats. So you could go to the website of House of Funk, click on the Matter tag, order beer to be delivered to your house from their website instead of visiting the House of Funk brewery. But that whole idea is actually much bigger than that because you could connect things that are reporting devices. So if you've got things that are sensor-driven or sensor-based problems where you need to represent that data in a 3D context, the Matterport cloud is actually quite good for that. So doing interactive walkthroughs, this is really about how you can prepare a presentation of a finished product. So we're using this in some of our marketing work where we come out and we kind of have a PowerPoint of different things that came together in terms of this is a stage conversation that we want to have. So, but this is beyond marketing. You can do this for a coordination view as well. So you take in kind of the scan of where you are in construction, document some of your problems that you need to talk about with your partners, and then you can kind of integrate different models together, again, through that Matter tag. So company is small. We're just at 71 employees now, and so we've had a lot of growth. But the thing that's kind of interesting about what you'll notice on Etro Construction, there's a very large percentage of a small construction company dedicated to innovation and technology and pre-construction. So we're really leveraging that really good pre-construction services yield better kind of project returns on negotiated sums. So that's kind of Etro's game and how we're set. And really, for us to continue growth, we do need to leverage technology in an intelligent way so we can actually do more with less. So what we did in the beginning, you'll notice in our kind of growth curve, we were adding kind of a very direct relationship for number of people versus revenue that the company was bringing in. But now, 2020 and beyond, we're actually not looking to grow. We're looking to grow our responsibility, but we're not looking to grow our staff. So now it's really on Matt and I's work to kind of see where are all the efficiencies we can come about with technology. And most of that is just looking at where we're entering data more than once, or where we're having conversations that need to happen more than once. So a big part of Etro's journey was defining the values. And I think if I'll kind of give you cues for walkaway points from this talk today. Having values that are actually meaningful to your company can be drivers and help you in making decisions around what kind of technology you need or what priority of technology you want to have. So for Etro, they really wanted to hit on these four. So having love, having authenticity, having curiousness, and having a progressive outlook. So what this says to us in terms of an innovative strategy, we're looking for things that are new and different, things that are untested, and that Etro is actually going to be one of those testing grounds due to it being curious and due to it wanting to be progressive and a leader in terms of technology that we use. But then at the end of it, we still want to build. We still want to build projects, and so we need technology that helps us become better builders. So I'm going to focus on curiousness because it was through this value that Etro thought about where are they going to be in 10 years? What kind of company do they want to be in 10 years? And so some of you may be aware of the term BHAG, Big, Hairy, Audacious Goal. Etro's is to build a people-driven AI that makes beautiful attainable in 10 years, by 2030. So right off the cuff, you're probably looking at this and thinking, this is not an objective statement. This does not have a clear deliverable. So the only clear deliverable on this is that we are going to make some sort of automated system that is people-driven. And then the subjective part is that things that are beautiful and attainable. And so that's actually how Etro is going to connect back to the community, back to the market, and kind of create definition around these things. So what are beautiful products? How much do they cost? What are attainable products? And what does attainable actually mean? Is that just cost, or is it locally resourced? Is it sustainable? So there's a lot of different things here that we're looking to work with the community and kind of a marketing effort to build this up so that we have a people-informed set of parameters that we are then kind of putting into an automated kind of consumer-facing product. So when you take that 10-year goal of what do you need and then wind back all of the different pieces of technology you would need to make something in that space, you get a timeline that looks something like this. So what you'll notice on some of these is that we're obviously having to get into CAD and BIM tools. We need three-dimensional models of the different products that we're using. And we need reality capture because at the end of the day, we are building something in a physical space. So we need to have an understanding of how those two things marry up. So as you kind of progress into the future, concepts like the digital twin or intelligent handover, all of these things become key concepts that you need to figure out in terms of quantitatively, what is that data? What is that structure? How does it look like? And then as you continue to press forward into the future, now we're really looking at product development. So it's kind of like you become a software company in terms of looking at a product, how do you market it, how do you source it, how do you continue its maintenance. So right now today, I think most companies, when they look at their software stack, all the different things that they use, they probably get a map that looks something like this, and it's just a big mess of tools, and you're not really sure how they connect or kind of what the overall strategy is for all of them. So the metaphor for that, in my mind, is that you've got a toolbox with a lot of really useful products in it, but it's totally unorganized. You have no idea what's in there. And if we were to think about our digital tools, like physical tools, there's some key things that are important for organization. What are you doing for password management? What are you doing for data management? What is the structure and the output of all of the different tools that you use? How are they integrated? And more importantly, do you have a backbone for all of your accounts? So in tech, sometimes that's referred to as single sign-on. Do you have a safe and secure way of providing access to all of your tools, or are you allowing your employees to just kind of think about what they want to use and try them out? So ultimately what you want is a toolbox that's something much more like this. And your integrated strategy is actually the pegboard. How are all of these different tools connected? What's hosting them? What's providing them authentication? So when we look at that, the first thing you do is organize your applications in terms of what are they? Do we have a mobility app stack? Do we have a productivity app stack? And do we have core apps that are essential to business? So Matt's going to go into our journey of why we picked G Suite over Office 365. But this is just a kind of a quick preview into categorization of applications. And so this is something that you need to have when you first get into what is your overall tech stack. So, and what's very hard to see here is that there are actually arrows that are pointing towards data flow of all of the different applications. And so just as a quick overview, what you'll see in our tech stack, Procore and G Suite are key to kind of how the business runs as a kind of digital DNA. So all of the different documents are hosted on Procore. That's where we can search. That's where we can share. That's where we can provide different types of access externally to Etro. And then G Suite is our backbone for all of our internal work. And so we'll get more into this. If I were to just focus on any one of our different tools, like G Suite, you can start to see that it's not necessarily directly connected to everything else. So this is very much a current state for Etro, and there's an end state for where we'd like to be, where everything is connected and intelligently passing data. But at the moment, this is the best. This is what we've got. So we're going to keep getting better. And one thing that you'll notice, like really core tools, things like Microsoft Project and Sheets, aka Excel, these are silos of data. They do not share well. Microsoft Project can export out as a data format, but it can't export events. The way it has a time signature is actually quite complicated because it can be varied Microsoft Project to Microsoft Project. And in Excel, as everyone is very familiar with, you can completely customize that. A cellular relation to another cellular relation within two different Excel files are usually dramatically different in terms of if you export that data out to a database, can they actually correlate the two? It's more or less unstructured data. So in terms of Etro's roadmap, we've got a lot of work to do to get these two core tools better integrated with everything else that we're using. And so the real reason that I think anyone from a practical level needs a technology stack or a technology innovation strategy, when you consider new tools, what are you actually talking about? Is a tool just serving a function? Is it solving one singular problem in isolation, or is it connecting to the rest of your tools that you have? So that generally means you have an input-output relationship with the rest of your tech stack. So anytime we bring something in, now that we have a technology stack and the beginnings of our data structure being mapped, we can actually ask that question. What kind of data can it provide? What kind of data can it receive? And that can help us make a decision between two tools that do similar work, but we need kind of one thing to help us out in terms of defining that Occam's razor.
So Aubrey touched on a lot there. There's a lot of different aspects that come into creating the stack. It can often feel like this sometimes. We have different departments with very specific needs. And often we'll receive individual requests that could lead to an individual solution. But what we want to try and do is consolidate everything into a platform that sort of works for all employees. And a way that we do that is through these two Airtable forms. So these are accessible to anybody in the company. And this is where we receive a lot of input for things that are happening out in the field or in the office that we might not have a chance to touch on the day-to-day. So on the left, we have a new conference form, and on the right, a new technology form. And this sort of allows everyone to kind of provide input on the go. And from those forms, we get an aggregate in Airtable here. And this really allows us to ask questions and sort of narrow down the list of potential technologies and softwares that we implement. So the stack that you saw before had about like 30 in there, and that gets narrowed down from this long list on the left here. And in construction, in our industry, this can happen a lot. There's a ton of tools out there, a lot of innovation happening. So it's really important for us to look for a simple tool that solves a complex problem, and it can often feel a little bit like this with a very focused look at what we're doing. So one of the most recent larger scale sort of side-by-side comparisons that we did recently was with G Suite and Office 365 in our goal to sort of move towards being exclusively cloud. So there was a lot that went into this. We sort of developed a bit of a process, with the first step being listening to our employees at all levels in the organization, so site staff and office staff as well. They have different needs, so we need to get in the room with them and kind of understand what specifically they need out of the tool. And then researching those. So based on a success criteria of what we've heard from the staff, this is just a simple data visualization of the difference between G Suite and Office and the different tools and what might be applicable to each member in the organization. And then we tested both. So we ran a test of both platforms with about 10 to 15 staff, and then using the feedback as a visual to sort of tell the story on how we're making these decisions and the process that goes into these decisions. And then implementation as well, with the data visualization that's easy to digest for everyone in the organization so that they can kind of follow along with the journey and stay up to date with what we're doing.
So as you saw kind of in the responses gathered, we're just starting to tell stories around this is what we think the staff wants. So in the kind of art of storytelling, it's all about capturing feedback so that you as a technology leader is not one that's just making a decision that you think is best for your company. You've actually captured data, you've captured feedback, and you've now found a way to represent that back to your company. So you're saying, I've heard you, and this is what I think you want, and this is a solution that I think matches what you need. So data stories is a way of building trust, and it's a way of communicating transparently. The other thing that's kind of interesting in 2020 is that data sources can be quite different. So you might have heard of a term, passive data capture. Some of that, if you look at construction site security, for instance, this is a data source. It is video. So oftentimes when I think of video, you may not think that it is a data source, but today with image recognition, and image recognition being such a widely developed kind of process, video is an incredible data source. And more interestingly, the video source and your source of data does not change. What changes is how you question the data set. So you're looking at kind of evaluating deduction rules in which you can determine volume from pixels and then take that and start answering questions like, how many safety violations did we have today? Now we're just training cameras to look for people without helmets. We can also ask questions like, how many trades were working in a particular part of the building today? So that's a really big construction management task. It's generally spent with a foreman or a superintendent walking and asking and kind of making that observation. So you can get a lot of this data-driven analytics pushed to you from video. But I will say, so we're working with a partner, Indus AI. And Indus AI is a startup based out of Toronto. And I would highly recommend that if you get into any of this really cutting-edge work, get a partner. So we're set up in my tax with UBC. We'll be working with Dr. Cheryl Staub-French and the BIM Topics Lab. You need that help because now you can get access to things like data scientists or data visualization experts, where you can ask the question, be worried about the business, and you have academics that are there to help you kind of develop the harder questions or the harder kind of pieces of the data work that are going to be far beyond our expertise. Other things that are interesting, I think a lot of people are kind of slowly and surely getting into the world of data visualization. Google Data Studio is obviously now our partner since we're a G Suite company. If you're with Microsoft, you have Power BI. If you started doing this 10 years ago, you were probably using Tableau. All of these are great. All of these provide structures of data and kind of easy-to-use visualizations. The big kind of learning lesson, I think, for everyone once they get into data viz work, your data set is not ready for visualization more often than not. You need to do a lot of pivoting. You need to do a lot of controlling and isolating and organizing. And so 99% of your effort in any data viz work is going to be organizing data. 1% is going to be spent on making it pretty. So I think knowing that before you go in, knowing that your data is going to be a mess and it's not going to be accurate, then you can start to get in and quickly do this type of work. It's the same in any of the three main platforms. You drop in graphs, you marry up data fields, and then you can start having kind of a data viz workflow. So going back to our tech stack, we'll just kind of do a quick round robin of the things that we have. So you'll notice that PDFs are very big. PDFs are humongous in construction. And having a PDF strategy is actually its own problem. Are you going to run optical character recognition to pull the data from the text fields? Are you going to try to isolate images so you know which PDFs have images? Are they going to be organized categorically by project or by project number or by project type or by typology of construction? You have a lot of these different types of questions that you can ask yourself just on one file type. Your Excel files are a completely different breed of problem where different project managers like to do things differently. But so with PDFs, our partner is Bluebeam Review. We're still using that quite heavily. For bid leveling, we're using Pipeline Suite. And so Pipeline we like, and we chose this because we work at a smaller scale. So suggesting something like Autodesk's kind of building connected workflow required an account, and it required people creating this kind of like barrier to entry for them working with us, where Pipeline, we could enter accounts on the fly. So a lot of our partners in smaller scale construction, they still use a fax machine. They don't have a cell phone. It's very different in terms of trying to get them to do something online. So it was a way for us to passively create our data set. Then we use things like DocHub, which is in the top left there. DocHub is a PDF editor and viewer that's native to G Suite, so that we can push that straight from our application launcher inside of Chrome and then connect it into our PDF workflow. And then we have, obviously, Revit and Autodesk, both obviously massive silos in connection to the rest of the tech stack. Indus AI, which is kind of in the top center, also another big silo. I'm going to work through a few of these other ones. So Indus is here. So interestingly, Indus can push a visual data set straight to Google Data Studio. And it's just because it can speak natively to Sheets. Indus is built in a G Suite fashion. So a lot of its data capture and analytics, even though being processed by Amazon Web Services, can speak straight to Google. So a lot of the analytics that we would get and kind of snapshots of insights would be essentially a Google Sheets file. So Google Data Studio just being kind of like one small piece of how this works. You're probably questioning now, how are we getting everything into Google Data Studio? So the big mapping is to G Suite. So if we can have information come in via Google Drive or via Google Sheets, then we can push to Google Sheets. But we have another partner in that, which is Zapier. So Zapier, we're just kind of in the beginning of this workflow. If you haven't heard of Zapier, it's kind of your super simple API kind of integration tool. So essentially, it's a web event product. So it's looking for a change in one web tool, and it can communicate that change to another web tool. So for us, Zapier is connected into Airtable, which is kind of our flexible database of how everything else is being kind of represented and connected. And then Airtable goes to Google Sheets back to Google Data Studio. So those are the types of problems that your tech stack and your tech map, those are the things that you're asking. What's that data flow? Can it communicate? Specifically, what field of data are you pushing to another field of data in another product? So more to that, what we're essentially trying to make is a data schema. So those of you that have done database work, this is kind of what you need in order for any database to function. You need meta-translation layers between all of your different tools, all of your different forms of capturing data, in a way that you can start to represent holistically what's happening within an organization. So I think Airtable is kind of a godsend for the construction industry, and in that it can consume Excel. So whatever your sheet format is inside of Excel, you can literally copy-paste that into Airtable. The biggest difference, though, is that cells are the kind of base layer of Excel. So everything that you have described across your columns and your rows, those are cellular formulations. And then in Airtable, it's an introductory to database work. So everything is a record-based kind of allocation of each of the different rows that you would have in Excel would become records in Airtable. So with a little bit of practice, you can start setting up some pivot tables to enhance your spreadsheets into a database.
So what we're trying to do is essentially move away from a traditional Excel spreadsheet, which has minimal functionality. You can run calculations, but it's tricky to kind of leverage the data in a way that makes sense. So as Aubrey mentioned, we're trying to transition more into Airtable and leverage the group, filter, and sort functions and the ability to link between tables and really try to sort of make the information easier to view and share amongst the organization. So what's really important for us is that we have a bit of a plug-and-play mentality. So if a tool in the stack isn't working the way that we thought it would, we need to be able to take it out. So For example, if this spoon on this mechanism is a bit too short, the salt's not going to make it to the plate, and we need to fix that. So with CakeHR, we had a solution that was working for us in the interim that we were using really well. But as we've sort of grown and progressed, we've needed to make changes. So with Airtable, we were able to create an HR database ourselves and sort of solve that problem. So one thing that we're really focused on at the moment culturally is adoption, both for technology and for our internal processes as well. This is a really hard problem to address, and we sort of need to sort of come at it at the mindset of a marathon runner, in the sense that we are constantly going to be going those long distances, and adoption really is the last mile, the hardest step. But if we can work towards that, then we're doing our jobs.
So, and adoption is really interesting because even as a small company of 70 people, we can implement incredibly fast. But adoption still takes the same amount of time as if you're at a company of 20,000 people. One of the key data types that I've kind of noticed on this journey that is super problematic is time. Every product treats time in a different way. If you're inside of Revit or if you're inside of AutoCAD and you're allocating phases or you're allocating work weeks, there's a completely arbitrary, non-time-stamped piece of definition that cannot come in and talk to something like Microsoft Project. So even if I'm going to pull all of those time fields and those dates, I'm going to try to allocate, this is a span of weeks that represents this arbitrary name, phase 2, I can't actually get Revit in an intelligent way to speak to that. So if the design changes in Revit, I can't push that back into Microsoft Project and update it. Or if I have a problem on site, a trade has a big delay and is not able to produce or procure an amount of material, and we now need to intelligently update the rest of the schedule. It's actually super difficult. So because everything is so different, we started with what I kind of naively thought would be the simplest time problem to solve, which is just recording our own time, and as it turns out, as an integration story, that's really tough because the partners that you need to work with in terms of doing your payroll, those are big institutions. So our payroll partner is ADP. ADP is happy to do an integration with you. Just be prepared that it may take 6 months to a year to actually pull that off and make it work. So we do this for each one of our products. We just call it a hell no or hell yes chart. And so as Matt was talking about in the beginning, on the far left column, these are the things that we heard from our company. These are the arbitrary things that they said they want on a time tool. And then we had some tech decisions that we made in terms of finding things that we thought would address most of those. So some were suggested from the company, others were ones that we found. Ultimately, we landed on kind of 2 hell yeses that made the most sense. We had Nikobot, which would have been a little artificial intelligence inside of our Slack communication environment. And we had T-Sheets, which is just basically a mobile native application that also works as a web app. So each one of the different kind of fields we went through on all of the other products, we had some really hardline things where if it was a no on a particular request, that made it an automatic hell no. And so for us, I think what's kind of nice if you are responsible for doing tech innovation at your company, if you do a chart like this, what you're really representing is I'm not just making this decision because I know the most about technology. I'm making this decision based on a set of parameters that you as a company provided to us. So T-Sheets being our tool, the real thing with time on this that's even more interesting than just finding a solution that integrates, now you get to ask a new question. You get to ask, are we recording time in the right way? Previously, we were looking at time from terms of payroll, cost allocation, how it's hitting all of the different project budgets. But if we actually want to use time as a benchmark, are we performing our projects any faster than we had previously? You now need things that are task-based instead of budget-based. So task-based things are like you want to know how long it took for someone to do framing, for instance. So even though you might spread that budget around and do some creative accounting to make that work in terms of like settling your books, if you really want to know how much time something took, you need to rethink how you actually capture time across your company. So when you do things in a task-based manner, the top line category is what project are you on, then what phase of work are you in, and then what task of that work are you working on. And then in that case, what you want is flexibility to allow for your accounting team to still represent honestly and accurately back to your clients. But for your own team, you have that flexibility to go deeper into why do certain things take so long. So along with all of our tech innovation, we have a big lean implementation strategy, which most construction companies do. But for lean, in terms of assigning where waste is, if you have a good time capture system that's passive, you can actually have that question provided to you through data, not through someone's perspective. So that's a huge undertaking that we're looking at now, just in terms of how we can allocate tasks within project codes that can then still be flexible enough so that we can understand the budget and how long things are taking. So for those of you who haven't seen this book, it's not a new book. The Visual Display of Quantitative Information is from Edward Tufte. This came out in the late 70s, early 80s, and all of the graphic visualizations he did were done by hand. He plotted them in his garage. And looked at really interesting problems that are time-based. So he looked at battles that Napoleon did. He looked at the subway system in New York City. It's a really fantastic kind of overview of this is how you can leverage data visualization. And when you think about all of the different problems that you might be tackling in your business, I would often kind of just recommend referring this just so you get a better understanding of this is how data can talk. This is how stories can be told. And we've all seen that the construction industry is just slightly above hunters and gatherers and the overall tech adoption curve. This was just recently put out by the Harvard Business Review. But the thing that I found maybe most interesting in this graphic is that they also gave you what your opportunities are. So if you just take the overall values that they were looking at, and you look back at our tech stack, these are the ones that we're addressing. We're looking at our digital asset stock. So what tools are we using? What physical things are we buying? What are our expendables? And what do we need to have a better control of in terms of where's this money going? That's just simply adding in intelligence to some of your spreadsheets. Transactions, how do we pay each other? How do we pay our partners? Most of the construction world, there's a huge amount of time spent on invoicing, dealing with change orders, dealing with all of these kind of really simple transaction that should just be a submission digitally. Even if it is a fax or even if it is a PDF, you can still have digital kind of OCR processes that capture that data and bring it into your accounting system. We have a long journey on that process, but I think that's a huge opportunity for the construction industry. And then just thinking about your business processes. So how intelligent does work come in the door and then turn into a project? I think for most companies, if they're really being honest, it's a terribly unsophisticated process. You're relying on a lot of people that have words that are coming in, thinking about what they heard the client say, writing it down into a form, trying to come up with a budget, and then going into pre-construction where many of those same questions are asked again. So I think business process and how you bring work through the door is another huge one. And then, of course, just digitization of work. Much of the work that you do in construction cannot be digitized. It's a manual process. If you're cleaning up a site and you need to shovel snow or you need to clean a roof, that cannot be digitized, at least not anytime soon. But how you budget that time, how you budget that work, that can be digitized completely. Can you anticipate weather better? I don't know if any of you have seen some of the startups out in Toronto that are looking at agricultural spend in terms of watering plants. They're running machine learning on weather patterns and actually getting pretty specific in terms of dropping the amount of water per seed across an entire farm. So that's quite interesting, and I think that's something we're definitely looking at in terms of can we understand and predict weather a bit better. So looking at our overall stack again, this for us is a journey, and this is going to change many times kind of as we progress into the future, look at different tools, look at different systems. But what you're really seeing as our big silos, Microsoft Project bottom left, CMIC, our accounting software in the top right, and an ADP kind of next to it. So our payroll, our accounting, and our budgeting are all wildly different silos. And I think if you just think of your business at first, like what are your silos of information, that's a really great way to start kind of your journey into having a tech stack. So we've left a good bit of time here for questions. So with that, we'll put it up to you guys. And please grab the mic if you're going to ask a question.